So the topic of the talk today will be how shall we reducing global neonatal mortality, and what are the solutions that we should focus on. And I've been working for the last decade in low-income countries, both in Africa and Asia. And also, to put things in perspective, I've included some data from Laos, where my colleague Thomas Brune, who was working as a neonatologist in our unit until he moved to Laos. So it will be very nice to have inputs. The data is not the most recent, but I wanted to also get Laos in a global perspective. So you'll see some added data. So you may think, why on earth are we looking at a family of hyenas? This is a picture I took in South Africa, and little did I know that the pups, the small hyenas that are beside the mother there, were very lucky, because we share a common burden with these animals. Hyenas and humans have the highest newborn mortality rate among mammals. So we are exceptions, we can say, in the world, and about 60% of hyena cubs die of birth asphyxia, and the mothers are also in danger, as the birth canal is only 2 centimeters in diameter, and giving birth is often fatal for first-time mothers. And in a similar way to humans, hyenas have developed very sophisticated social organization around the surviving litter. And ultimately, we have evolved into a sophisticated social species because of our ability to organize the care of our fragile offspring. But without educated health staff, public health measures, and innovation, we will not be able to reach our goals. But what we need to understand is also that during most time of our history, 20 to 30% of our babies have died during the first month of life. And in 2020, this number, the global number, is 1.8%, from 20 to 30%. So a large part of the job has been done, and we have many to thank for the past 100 years for this incredible achievement. So let me present you Kasuba. Kasuba is a baby that was born at 37 weeks in the spring of 2019 at Kawempe Hospital in the northern part of Kampala, which is the capital of Uganda. And she's the firstborn of a single mother. Her name is Dorothy, and she comes from a poor area in the city. She suffered from obstructed labor and was transferred to the hospital. And the transport arrangement took several hours. So when she was finally admitted to the ward, she was completely exhausted. She was examined and planned for a cesarean section. However, she had no money for drugs and equipment needed for anesthesia. So she was born the next day by vaginal delivery and was not breathing. And her mother had consented to be part of the NeoSupra trial that we are conducting in the hospital. And she was resuscitated by a well-trained team and started breathing at 5 minutes of age. And this is, in fact, the first picture when she's opening her eyes. So we could say happy birthday, but is the first day of birth a happy birthday? It should be a happy day, but for all of us, this is the time of life where you are at greatest risk of death and disability. And I think most of you know these numbers, that globally over 1 million babies die on this day. And 75% of all neonatal death actually happen during the first week. And this is the most dangerous time to be alive. So this is the reason why we're looking for potential game changers. One is evidence-based solutions, political action, high quality care in hospitals, innovation, and equity. And I'm going to spend some time talking on about these 5 essential critical elements for improving neonatal death, and I will focus a bit more on innovation at the end of the talk. So first, evidence-based knowledge. That's one of the greatest game changers in the treatment and prevention of malnutrition, infectious diseases, implementation of mass vaccination that has led to a dramatic decline in child mortality. And with investments in research, WHO policies and programs and global initiatives, we have in the last decade built the foundation for understanding also newborn health. And hundreds of papers have been published, and we can deliver now crucial data to decision makers for how we are to address these problems. So how should we build further from evidence to action? In 2014, the groundbreaking Lancet series gathered 55 authors from 18 countries and wrote 5 similar papers that outlined a roadmap for strategic and actions to end preventable newborn mortality. If you're interested in this topic, you must read these 5 papers because they are really telling us what we know today and how we should move ahead. And they have set out a clear path for what needs to be done to greatly reduce mortality rate and meet our objectives in the future. And this shift in the political landscape happened already in the 90s with the adoption of the Millennium Development Goals. Under 5 mortality, that means the death of children under 5 years old, has been cut in half during the last 25 years. The word from Ban Ki-moon, who was head of UN at the time, has said that this was one of the greatest successes of human history, especially for the effects on women and children health. Now we are in the era of the Sustainable Development Goals. The ambitious objective of the Millennium Goals was to reduce the 1990 mortality of children by 2/3, and 12.7 million children died in 1990. That number was reduced to a little over 6 million in 2013. It's not a 2/3 reduction, it's still a fantastic success. So the framework for the Sustainable Development Goals launched in 2015 set the global agenda on social, economic, and environmental development for the next 15 years. And for the first time, and this is really important, they have set a target, a specific target that all member states have signed in the Sustainable Development Goal here, number 3 out of the 17 goals. And it is that no countries must lose more than 12 babies per 1,000 by 2030. That is 8 years from now. And one of the crucial papers in the Every Newborn Lancet series was from Professor Joan Lawn. You will find her name everywhere when reviewing these topics. What few people know is that her own mother was a teacher and a missionary in northern Uganda, and the mother of Joy Lawn suffered obstructed labor and was transferred to a bush hospital where the medics for the first time performed a cesarean section, and miraculously she survived. And now 40 years later, she published one of the really most important and interesting papers, 4 million neonatal deaths, where, when, and why. So what are we learning? Where do the newborn die? In the world, we can see that there's 1 million babies dying in Africa, 1 million in Southeast Asia, and then a much smaller number in the American continents, which include both North America and South America, and the rest is Europe. The current global neonatal mortality rate is 18 per thousand, and 3 large regions that are in Africa, Eastern Mediterranean, and Southeast Asia still have twice the rate of 20 per thousand, and that's where the goal for the agenda is set in 8 years. We were able to reach this, and we can see that Laos is exactly now on the world average. I will come back with a better understanding of the data. I also think most of you now know why newborns die. The 3 main killers that we need to address are preterm birth, birth asphyxia, and neonatal infections, and roughly each are responsible for 1/3 of all death. What we know today is that 2/3 of these deaths are preventable. If we look at the current interventions that are done, and here we see on top of this chart the countries with the highest mortality rate. If we're not doing anything and just following current trends, it will take about 110 years for African babies to enjoy a safe life comparable to high-income countries today. And we had in Europe these numbers in the beginning of the century. However, it took only 30 years to come down to levels that are close to the ones that are done today. So we need to accelerate the rate of change. So let's look a little closer to the current trends and the SDGs objective that need to be reached 8 years from now of 12 per thousand death. Estimates show that we need to accelerate the rate of decline. And I'm going to look at 3 countries that I know quite well to see if they are on track to reach the goal. So Burkina Faso, which is a small country just south of the Sahara, which is the 15th poorest country in the world, in a region that has been very, very resistant to change. And if you see here, you're at the number of 40. And unfortunately, very little is happening. You see there's barely any rate of decline. So those countries, this is a country and a region of the world which is very resistant to change. Uganda, where we have worked, has a lower death rate, but unfortunately, the solutions that we've been talking about haven't really been implemented in a good way. And the data reported for Uganda for the last 10 years is no change at all. So this is very depressing and concerning. And we are also worried from what we hear from Uganda now and the region that the results of the current COVID crisis is that these numbers may have increased during the last 2 years. The good news is that some countries are on track, like Rwanda, for instance, which is a neighboring country, just as poor as Uganda, but it's a small country that, of course, has received lots of international support, but has also done huge reforms in healthcare and really have implemented many of the recommendations that have been set in the Every Newborn Lancet series. And we see that they are really in track. This here is the 12 per thousand, and they are around 17 per thousand. I don't have the latest data. And interestingly enough, the rate of decline in Laos has been very similar to Rwanda, and Laos is one of the countries that still has one of the highest mortality rates in Southeast Asia. So it seems that Laos is doing a good job if the numbers are reported that I have integrated here are correct. So if we look between year 2000 and 2017, 123 million babies died, or children died, sorry. And this is just a staggering number. If you just pause a minute and think about 123 million during the 17 years that have passed. And 3 years ago, Nature published this series where you can see the hotspots of children mortality rates. And you can see here, in fact, the change that if we could think that this is like a fire, a bushfire, seems really that we are extinguishing them, that we are on track. And what I would hope is to see a world where we don't have any red spots here anymore. So, is it possible to learn this? And can we learn from success stories about potential game changers? So we're going to focus on 6 countries across 3 continents and look at those aspects of evidence-based solution, political action, high quality care in hospitals, equity and innovation, and see what the problems have been and where the success story is. And we'll look at Cuba, at Venezuela, Burkina Faso, Uganda, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. If I had more time, I would also have compared Laos, but we can have that in the time of discussion that will come after this. So on this chart, I have plotted in 1970 here, just that's why there's this huge gap because it's not a linear scale between 1970 and 1990, just that to put in perspective also the huge rate of decline that was already happening before the Sustainable Development Goals, and that we had in a country like Bangladesh and Laos, we're reporting numbers over 100 neonatal death, which is about 10 times what the goals are set for 2030. So we had already a very fast rate of decline. And we see that Laos had a very, very high rate of decline, and that would be interesting to know how they reached that and continued to decline here until 2017. Rwanda is interesting since everyone knows about the terrible genocide, and we see that these higher numbers were during the huge genocide in Rwanda, and after that they set in their reforms and have accelerated the rate of decline compared to similarly poor countries like Burkina Faso. Venezuela and Cuba also started from high numbers, and South America has really pioneered implementation of robust solutions. However, there's a warning sign here to show that political instability in the country can really change things for the worse, and we know that Venezuela is going through a huge economic and political crisis, and the number have raised dramatically between 2015 and 2019, while Cuba, that has put enormous emphasis on neonatal care, continues to decline, and now has countries that are 3 times richer are not able to get as low numbers as Cuba. So I'm having a problem in this, for some reason, in changing the now. Sorry. So what are the potential roadblocks? So we talked about Venezuela, collapse in living standards, and a complete breakdown of the health system, and that shows really how there always is a threat for reversing progress also. And this should be a warning that we're never safe. Burkina Faso has a very patchy and weak health system, low utilization of health facilities, and we'll come back to the example of Burkina Faso, which is really interesting when the population has a very low level of trust and there's a poor quality of care and people don't want to go to hospital. Uganda has a particular problem with high fertility rate and overburdened facility and staff shortage, because it's one of the countries in the world where the highest numbers of babies are born, and they cannot really absorb it in the system. And in Pakistan, you have very low level of women education and large number of small babies because women are not prioritized as far as education, and many mothers give birth at a very young age. So rapid progress that we have seen in Cuba, Rwanda, and Bangladesh is we see in Cuba they've had consistent family planning. They've also had a low fertility rate. Rwanda has invested in facilities and recruitment and education of staff and implemented evidence-based neonatal care packages. Bangladesh has had a dramatic reduction in fertility rate, and we know that that is correlated to lower neonatal mortality, and they have also skilled attendance at birth and a quite dynamic leadership. So what type of interventions should we focus on? This is my colleague Olof Salstad, who has pioneered guidelines in newborn resuscitation for the past 20 years. And from his estimates, about 2 million lives could be saved with what we would call frugal technology. That would cost less. The investment would be less than $2 per birth. But if we want to further reduce to 5 per thousand, it would require an investment in higher technology. And countries such as Vietnam, where we're also working, they are very well on track to come to 5 per thousand, but the cost of delivery is 100 times higher, $200. And in most Western countries, the cost per delivered babies is $2,000. So unless the countries are getting much richer, we have the 1/3 that is left will take a long time before we can get there. This is a list of the most important intervention where we have high quality evidence. Antenatal steroids in preterm labor, antibiotic prevention in risk babies for infections, delayed cord clamping, comprehensive care for infections and prevention of infections, and room air resuscitation. And recently, we know that hospital-based kangaroo care can have dramatic effects on reducing neonatal mortality just by putting the baby close to the mother immediately after birth. So improving the quality of education done by training midwives in particular, because in 98% of all births, there's no doctors and there's only midwives. And here we can see when data from Chile, how, for instance, here you had the decline when they had done a big investment in staff and equipment. And after after training for neonatal resuscitation had also a very dramatic effect on newborn death. And this was the implementation of surfactant for premature babies. So we can't really say that there's a causal relationship, but this stepwise introduction of high quality care really changes the numbers. Team training is needed because safe delivery necessitates a team, and this is the old wood carving from Mali, I think, and where you really see there is a team around this midwife that is checking the mother. I think it's really fantastic, and they're communicating, they're looking at each other. And similarly, we can't have midwives in rural hospitals take care of the mother and the baby alone. We need to have team training. And helping babies breathe is now a program for team training and training newborn resuscitation skills. And if it's well implemented, you can also have a dramatic reduction of especially fresh stillbirth, but also newborn mortality. There's many problems to implement this in a good way, but we can't come around it, that we need a trained team around the baby. This is the data from Tanzania, but I see that I'm running a bit out of time because we started late. Yeah, these are the dramatic pictures from facilities that we've been working and showing the problem of overburdened staff. How these are babies at our unit where we were working. When you come in the morning, these are the babies that have been delivered in birth asphyxia during the day before. And you see in situations like this, you can really make no progress because these babies are not monitored. They're hypothermic, they're getting infections from each other. And you have one nurse at night taking care sometimes for 100 babies. So no matter what you're doing there, and even our studies failed to show just by doing one single very good intervention to reduce mortality because these problems remain downstream once the babies have been admitted. So we need to invest in facilities, and this is a healthcare center in Burkina Faso where we've been doing some studies, and one of our colleagues has interviewed families because when we were coming there were no patients, and they had such a distrust because of the low level of education of the patients, the bad equipment, that they were delivering at home. So these facilities were clearly underused. This is also from Burkina Faso, where they invested in this hospital in very expensive incubators that are not used because there's no power, there's a breakdown, and millions of dollars have been completely invested in the wrong thing when you could have built a kangaroo mother care unit for the cost of just buying these high-tech incubators. So we are at risk at doing bad investments. This is one of these comprehensive facilities that are popping up all over Rwanda and that are low cost, easy to maintain, and that are the same across the whole country, and that probably are one of the reasons why they are in track. Let me jump over this slide because we'll really move on a little bit. This is an interesting slide showing how big data analysis of what's really happening now can show us that we shouldn't really only focus on what's happening in country by country. With these kind of maps, you can see there's a 5 per 5 centimeter grid of under 5 mortality rate. And you can see that within a country like India, for instance, you have a huge difference within the country. So we need to understand better how in each nation, what is happening, not just the average number in the country. We need to see the outliers, the difference between different areas, and address these problems nationally. And for the last minutes of this talk, let me go through some of the innovations that are really exciting and that I think will play and are already playing a big role in improving the care of babies. First, respiratory support. There are very limited treatment options for small babies that are premature with respiratory distress syndrome. However, now there's been a rapid development of low-cost CPAP devices that have been introduced in low-income countries, and one of my colleagues here in eastern Uganda has shown that she could get a 32% decrease of mortality in babies less than 1,500 grams. And she has really involved the fathers in taking care of the babies that are on respiratory support, because the mothers, they need to breastfeed their other babies. So getting the fathers into the NICU was one of the solutions that really improved the care. So we need to see the fathers as well as an important resource for taking care of the babies. They shouldn't get kicked out of the NICU. They should be educated, and they really like doing this job, taking care of the babies, and find a great pride at doing that. So this I find very, very encouraging. 200 to 400,000 lives could be saved if we optimize care around birth asphyxia. And we also need to monitor the mother before, and Lærdal company in Norway has developed a comprehensive bundle of monitoring equipment, first for the mother, where she can check her heart rate, and there's an alarm if the fetal heart rate is falling before birth, and she can inform the midwives. And they also have the NeoBeat heart rate monitor for the baby that is very simple to use and giving great data. We have developed the NeoTap life support system because we believe that smartphones can save lives. Nearly every midwife now has a high-tech computer in their pocket, and our team has founded an organization, Tap for Life. You can find them on Google and in the App Store. And the system is free of charge, and it helps you by tapping the screen to auscultate the heart rate of the baby and after delivery, and get instant heart rate, and it's color coded to tell you immediately if you need to take action. You have you have guided resuscitation depending on the numbers that will pop up. They will also help you to ventilate at the right rate by giving a sound for ventilation. And in the app, you have tutorials, automated app car store, and all this can be distributed worldwide to be used instead in places that have no monitoring equipment. And you can even see it put to the phone inside a sterile glove, and the interface has been designed to be used even if you don't see the screen perfectly well. Management of jaundice is coming now also with specific low-cost devices, and we think that you have about 100,000 babies dying and more than 60,000 surviving with neurological impairment, and this is very easy to use, and the costs are going down. Infection control. Large number of fascinating trials where I think we should focus on umbilical care, because that's one of the places where you get serious infections, and that has where the parents can be educated in using chlorhexidine. And our colleagues in Uganda are doing a large randomized control trial on just the effect of using chlorhexidine when you come home after delivery. Also, we know now that it's possible to treat babies with oral antibiotics early for sepsis. This data is very exciting in preventing infections. Thermal regulation, and my colleague here, Thomas Brune in Laos, has been working a lot with kangaroo mother care. And as I said, the prevention of hypothermia that is a great problem for the sickest babies can be, and you're also preventing infections, in fact, by colonizing the baby with the mother's own bacteria that prevent the baby from getting sick. And if you compare this baby by the mother with the 10 babies that were lying in one hospital bed, you understand that it can be how important it is to get kangaroo mother care that can be done by the mother, but even by the father if the mother is too sick or cannot be at the hospital. Point of care diagnosis I won't go into, but there's more and more high-tech equipment with portable ultrasounds where you can get high care radiology even without the radiology unit using ultrasounds. We are currently working now on the project guiding the midwife directly through telemedicine during resuscitation, and I hope I will be able to present data on this on a few years. We're working with interesting technology, and as soon as COVID will let us into the country, we're going to start these studies. We have just a few minutes left, so I'm gonna because I thought first we had an hour. So fertility rate, as I said before, these are the numbers of baby per woman delivered, and this is the neonatal mortality rate, and we see really a linear correlation where countries with a high fertility rate really have higher numbers of deaths than lower fertility rate. And we see that Laos, I was really interested to see that there's been a very large number of decline in fertility rate, which can also, like Bangladesh, show why they have been so successful at reducing the last decades by 4 or 5 the rate of neonatal death, and Cuba is down here. Important for with family planning is the message. But even having educated mothers, and this shows how many mothers are in school, and in countries like Pakistan, where you have a minority of women receiving high-level education as compared to Cuba or Venezuela, you also see this linear relationship between level of education and neonatal death. So, to summarize, evidence-based solutions, I can't read here, political action, high quality care in hospital, innovation and equity is what we should focus on. And these are the words of Graham Marshall in the Every Newborn Action Plan, who's envisioning a world in which there are no preventable death of newborns or stillbirth, where every pregnancy is wanted, every birth celebrated, and women, babies, and children survive, thrive, and reach their full potential. And I want to thank you for all the people we have worked with over the years that have supported us during the trial and the research we are doing in these topics. That are doing a great job. And this is a photo of the little baby that we had when we had a reunion that is now doing well despite intensive newborn resuscitation, and she's our poster girl for the NeoSupra trial. Thank you very much, everyone, and we might have a few minutes for questions.
Thank you so much, Nicolas, for a very interesting presentation. So yes, we have a few minutes, and maybe we can stay some few minutes more. And I open up for questions from the audience. Maybe if there is maybe a comment or a question from Laos, from the team in Laos, the colleagues.
So I would suggest that some of the Lao colleagues, Ankam or Keo or Vidavon, want to comment on something. I think I'm too new in the country to make a comment on this. You want to say anything? No. Thank you, Nicolas, for taking your time and presenting the data. I think that's very, very interesting to see. It's so different when you sit in this end of the world and get all these numbers presented to you.
Thank you. Maybe there is someone else in the audience who have a question or a comment. If not, I will shoot out one. So, Nicolas, if you have to like choose one intervention that you think would be, I know it's an impossible question, but that would be the most efficient to reduce neonatal mortality, what would that be?
Well, if you look at published papers, when you have specific studies, there are a number of interventions around newborn resuscitation, kangaroo mother care, that really have shown the biggest impact. The problem has been to sustain this under a long period of time. And we know that if you do it in the right way, if you have a trained team of midwives that has the right equipment resuscitating the babies or taking care of preterm or low birth weight infants through kangaroo mother care, we can really come a very far way. And I think that those type of interventions are really the most important to focus on, and we as a medical profession have something that that we can contribute. The other type of taking care of premature babies will be much more expensive. I think that this is a question that really will be different for each specific country, depending on the economy, on the demography. So there's not really one size fits all. We all think there's one thing that you can do, but really it's a package. Very rarely you don't have silver bullets like a vaccine or oral rehydration. And when you have silver bullets, you can get just public health measures that make a big difference. In neonatal care, it will always be packages. And that's, I think, why things are going so slowly, because everyone has to work together, medical profession, community leaders, both local, national, and international politicians that are also shaping priorities in healthcare. So I'm sad to say I can't really give you a straight answer for one size fits all.
I think it was an excellent answer that maybe also shows that you need to see the whole picture and not just focus on one intervention.
It's an holistic approach. Yeah. I think there's no way around this. And anyone who's interested in this, I mean, we have a great team working with lots of passion around these solutions. And Morten joined us here a few years ago. we're very happy, and we'd like to keep contact with our colleagues in Laos and invite them to share data and thoughts, and any kind of collaboration could be considered.
Morten, if you can hear me, I have a question.
Yes, of course, shoot out.
So this is Anders Elvin from Gothenburg. Thank you for a very interesting talk. So on all the slides you showed about on where Africa was on the map, you saw that sub-Saharan Africa always had like red signs, but South Africa of course looked a little bit better. But even Botswana and Namibia looked a lot better, and they are still very poor countries. So what are they doing right? Is it that they have South Africa nearby, or what's the difference between Botswana and Namibia and the rest of sub-Saharan Africa?
Yeah, so I think looking at outliers is really interesting, and that's why I unfortunately don't know Namibia and Botswana that well, but I know from colleagues that have worked there that really they are quite those are countries that are one thing, they are close to South Africa. There's probably education, synergies in education programs, but we need to look at outliers, and Rwanda, that is equally poor to Burkina Faso and Uganda, is doing better by just doing the things that they should do. And we should be inspired and see that it's not only the economy, it's also the will of politicians. In Rwanda, for instance, now half of the parliament are women. And I'm sure just that, like, putting more women in the parliament is probably one of, a step that can make a big change, because they're really interested in the health of the mothers and the babies in a way that men are not.
Well, thank you. Now we are 5 minutes over 1, but maybe if there is some question left from the audience, we can take that before we end.
So Thomas here, one very specific question about the treatment of sepsis with oral antibiotics. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? I have not read about it before.
Yes, so let me just see if I can find yeah, so there was the Afrinest trial was conducted in Kenya, Nigeria, and the Democratic Republic in Congo, and you can find the paper in the Lancet in 2015. And they did a large randomized control multi-center trial with the simplified oral antibiotic treatment delivered in primary healthcare settings in babies with severe signs of infection, and the control arm was standard IV antibiotics, and there was no significant change. And we have also seen this in malaria treatment using artemisinin, giving rectal doses of artemisinin that also gave similar good effect in primary healthcare centers in Tanzania. So I think it's really important that you're able to act early, because we see there's such delays in transport to the referral hospitals that it's probably that you need to start very early, and we probably are underusing oral antibiotics and overusing IV antibiotics with antibiotic resistance in level 3 or level 2 facilities, where basically all babies are put on antibiotics no matter what the problem is. So this can be rationalized. But this is just, results from one trial. It needs to be confirmed, but it's showing us alternative solutions that we should continue to look at.
Thank you, Nicolas. I think we have to end there. The duty is calling for all of us.
Yes,
I think.
it is. Thank you, everyone, for participating during lunchtime. Was very happy to be invited and happy to have our friends in Laos with us. And have an excellent day.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
And